Hey, good morning, everybody. It's late September and we really all should be back in school. So today we're going to go to school on what's going on with our atmosphere, what's going on with climate change around the country. And in particular, we're going to bring you a guest who has a lot to say about climate change, and he's running for the right seat to bring that message. Chris?
Hey, Channing, I've known this guest for well more than a decade, both meteorologists. And a couple of years ago, we elected the first meteorologist to Congress. And it had been decades before there was another meteorologist in Congress. So there's another one who's running in Virginia. And I am very excited about this. And, with all of the misinformation and disinformation, we obviously need more science. And Channing, I'm not trying to rain on the lawyers that are out there, but we need a good balance between people that are trained and professional lawyers in Congress and also people that are scientists as well. So I think that's a good kind of middle ground, right? And a good median between the two. So I want to introduce today's guest, Sean Sublette. Meteorologist, was at Climate Central, spent time in broadcast television as a meteorologist, and now, Sean, you are running for Congress. Thank you for joining us on the 3 Degrees podcast.
Chris, Channing, thank you very much for having me. This is a long time coming, so I'm glad we have a chance to finally sit down virtually and talk through some stuff.
And Sean, let me start by saying I know that our third co-host, David Thorson, especially when he sees this on Substack, Spotify, or YouTube Live, the actual video, he's going to be chomping at the bit that he wasn't able to join us and talk with you about such important topics. I want to start with what Chris brought up. There's a lot of lawyers in Congress, but as a lawyer, I know that the courts are closed to climate change action. The best lawyers in the world are getting stuffed by our court system, which seems to be rigged, seems to be in the hip pocket of the GOP and the climate deniers. And so when people say to me, hey, why don't we do a lawsuit? Why don't we get something spectacular going and really teach the fossil fuel industry a lesson? The answer is no, we can't do that. There's a better way to do that. And I think that's why you're running. Why don't you share with our viewers your passion and what you can do that lawyers can't do?
Yeah, Channing, thank you. One of the things I want to do is bring science data back into the Congress. Absolutely, we need lawyers. We write laws. We need attorneys to write solid laws. However, we also need to have these based in sound science and sound data. We've seen the horror show just this week, the National Institutes of Health, RFK Jr. I mean, that's another side of science. It's healthcare, to be sure, right? But all science is under attack here in the United States. For me, meteorology, what we've seen to our colleagues at NOAA and the National Weather Service, and then, of course, climate science. I understand and respect that suddenly over these last 7 or 8 months, it's not at the top of everybody's ticket anymore. But this situation is not going away. So what I want to do is bring the professionals into the room. As good science is also interdisciplinary, I don't have all the answers myself. However, I do know good oceanographers. I do know good geologists. I do know good volcanologists. I know lots of people in the earth sciences that we could get together and reach strong conclusions, get the data, and have good policies based on science, data, and evidence.
On the display.
Now, wait, Chris, one second. I'm writing down the word Vulcan. I'm coming back to that one with my next question.
Do that. It's a fun word to say.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
I will say what happened at the UN truly was an embarrassment. And I love that Fox News was saying this was such a profound speech. I mean, there's nothing profound about it. It was like a middle schooler having a temper tantrum in front of world leaders, which, again, hurts our reputation as one of the world's largest leaders. One of the world's largest economies, right? And there's a lot of misinformation. And Mehdi Hassan has his book on how the art of an argument, right? And there's this Gish Gallop where you throw so much bullshit out that it's almost impossible to fact check. And literally everyone in that administration is a pro at that, right? They say things that are wildly inaccurate, false claims that have no evidence, nothing to back them up. So I do want to show the transcript of some of what President Trump said at the UN. We'll add that to the stage. Let me see if I can do this. There we go. And his vendetta, his argument against wind is largely based on his, the Turnberry golf course that he owns up in Scotland. But if you look, ruining the beautiful Scottish and English countryside with windmills and massive solar panels. Your time at Climate Central, you guys did a lot with the upside of clean renewable energy and how it's growing and expanding. So talk a little bit about that and how that really is just such a misconception.
I mean, it really is. It is a huge economic driver. And in time, that is going to lower energy costs because you do not have to depend on this fluctuation in fuel, whether that's oil or fossil gas or coal. I mean, coal is still being used a lot in China, right? China's building everything right now, but China is also leading in solar development. I told conservative friends 10, 15 years ago, I said, look, we can build the solar panels here, or we could buy them from China, but it's coming and it's here now. I mean, solar is the least expensive and quickest way to get electrons to the grid, period. And the battery technologies keep improving all the time. There's a company in the northern panhandle of West Virginia that is building these iron air batteries, which can store energy up to 4 days, better than the lithium ion batteries that give you about 4 to 6 hours worth of storage. So this is an economic driver. He doesn't like it because it hurts his bottom line. It hurts his golf course. And this is not what the presidency is supposed to be about. I think we kind of forget that sometimes because our siloed media environment kind of keeps us away from some of the things that, if you watch a certain kind of news that tilts a certain way, you never really hear the things that you might ought to hear and pay attention to. So I think that's really the big thing. He just doesn't like it. It hurts his bottom line. But we know, certainly in Iowa there, wind is huge. Onshore wind is huge there. And it's paying dividends to landholders there. It's the lunchbox money if you have a bad season agriculturally. So it is the economic driver of the future, and it is really sad that he just will not acknowledge that.
Or Channing, real quick, or if you grow soybeans and China has spent $0 billion on soybeans this year because they're one of the biggest buyers, right? That is a good way to help recover some of those losses.
It's so hard because I was literally in King William County on Virginia's Middle Peninsula 2 or 3 weeks ago talking to a farmer there at a picnic. He's got this huge soybean farm. So I pulled him aside. I'm like, how are you doing? He just shakes his head. He's like, we can't get a good price for our soybeans anymore because the tariffs. China's buying them all from Brazil. I'm like, so it's just one thing after another with this dude.
Our viewers, especially who we talk to in person, always talk about how the topics, bounce. And there's so many great topics that we've already brought up, including the catastrophe of a bumper corn crop in our country. And yet these farmers are going to go bankrupt.
I know.
Because of what's happening in D.C. And then they're going to be clamoring for us to bail them out because of what happened in D.C. It just blows my mind. But I'm a Trekkie. So, if our president was on this podcast, he'd be saying, he'd want to talk about the Vulcans and he'd want to talk about living long and prospering. But explain to our audience why knowing a volcanologist is important to understanding and communicating the climate science.
Right. There's still this kind of misconception that all the CO2 in the atmosphere is coming from the volcanoes. And that's just not the case at all. There are certain isotopes of carbon You've heard of carbon 12, carbon 13, carbon 14. Carbon 14 is radioactive. Carbon 12 is the most stable one. Volcanic carbon dioxide tends to be more carbon 13. And we don't see a big increase in that coming in the atmosphere. So that will be the signal, if you will. If the carbon dioxide was coming from volcanoes, we'd see a lot more carbon 13 in the atmosphere. And that's just not the case at all. All right. So we talk to volcanologists because they also understand volcanoes, what's in them, a lot better than I do. Right. So we need to get everybody from the earth sciences together so we can compare notes and get the right conclusions. Well, we checked on this here in the volcanologists, and oceanographers checked over here. So this is why we need to continue to work together as our scientists to understand the climate even better so we can prepare and mitigate and slow down the warming climate. It's already warmed 1.5 degrees Celsius, so that's pushing 3 degrees Fahrenheit already, and more warming's in the pipeline, right? So we need to slow that down because every 1/10 of a degree matters.
The disgrace show that our president performed at the UN is shocking in how deep he went in his denial or in his offering of crazy concepts. And Chris, as I toss this question to Sean, if you can bring up that second quote that you just had up earlier about the windmills, the president there is rambling about, well, it used to be in the 1920s, it was cold. And then, the climate keeps going up and down. So now they call it climate change. Can you lend some clarity to this crap from him?
It's crap. So it's crap. First of all, I mean, look, we know in the 1930s, it was warmer here in America versus the rest of the world. A lot of this tied back in to the Dust Bowl era. Right. But when you look at the global temperature in the 1930s, the United States was an anomaly. Most of the rest of the world was cool. Right. Now everybody is warm. Right. There's no anomalies that are warmer or cool. Everyone's warm now. Right. So this is the trope, as you were, that keeps getting brought up. Well, it was hot in the 30s, only here, not globally. So as Rafiki says, look beyond what you see. Right. You've got to look beyond your immediate surroundings to get the bigger picture, which is why we do that as earth scientists in the first place. Now, we do know that in the 70s, right, those of us of a certain age, Channing, no, it was a lot colder in the 70s also, but that was still because we had so many particulates left in the atmosphere and after the post-World War II industrial boom. So it was locally cooler. Those have settled out. So between a little less pollution in the atmosphere, right, and the additional CO2, mostly because of the CO2, we're seeing the temperature just really take off.
Now, I was looking recently at the impact of switching to renewable energies and why there's all this misinformation and disinformation. And I was shocked. I mean, obviously I knew, right, there was a lot of infrastructure to keep oil, coal, and gas going. And a lot of this was built and paid for by the fossil fuel companies, which were subsidized by the federal government. But there are $30 trillion left in assets that the fossil fuel companies hold claim to, that they own. So obviously it's clear that they don't want to just say, we're done with it. No. But in your district, how is that transition going to renewable energy? Or are there projects, and do you envision any projects? How could you bring that to your congressional district, Sean?
Sure. So my district is Virginia's first congressional district. It's the easy one to remember. It's number 1. And if you imagine an outline of the state of Virginia, and you think about those 3 peninsulas that kind of stick eastward into the Chesapeake Bay, it covers those 3 peninsulas and then arcs back here to the suburbs of the state capital where I live in Richmond. It doesn't include the city, it includes a suburban area. So it's about 780,000 people. And it's a big mix of rural, urban, suburban. Some people farm, some people work desk jobs, some people work in academia, some people work the water. It is a wide variety of folks. Now, when we talked about offshore, we talked about wind power. wind in Virginia in the summer, it just doesn't blow, right? So in terms of wind energy, Dominion Energy has a very large offshore wind facility that they're in the process of building. It's about halfway done, about 25 miles offshore Virginia Beach. That is expected to be operational by the end of 2026. All right. And then when you come inland, it's mostly solar that is being deployed here on land in Virginia. A number of these industrial solar places are going up left and right. Some people like them. Some people are scared of them because it's new and they just don't know what to expect. And there's a lot of big money lobbying against them. And as you both have seen, misinformation specifically designed to scare people into thinking there is something horrible coming when it's solar is actually quite innocuous. So that's the other thing that is going on right now. So part of the reason the solar is being implemented quickly is through a state law that goes back to 2021, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which, and I had to be careful to get my precise numbers correct. By 2035, X amount of energy needs to be renewable and a full transition by 2050. So those things are being moved, but that's state law. It's not federal law. I'm going to be running for a federal district, but we want to take some of that, state energy, if you will, and move it to the federal level.
Well, back to the president's disgrace tour at the UN in front of the world, he was talking about the fake energy catastrophe. And I wonder, Sean, can you help us understand how you look at this? Those three words, fake energy catastrophe. And I guess I'm wondering, I think we may have an energy catastrophe, but I'm not sure there's anything fake about what's going on.
He just throws a bunch of words together that don't mean anything, right? So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Everybody wants a better standard of living, kind of like what we have in the United States, and that is going to take more energy, right? So we need to deploy more resources more quickly. This goes back to the solar that we talked about earlier. But we just can't burn coal. We just can't keep burning natural gas. It is going to raise the temperature of the planet even further, right? So the sea levels are going to come up. The rain is going to be heavier. The tropical systems are going to intensify more rapidly. We've already seen this a lot here over the last 10 years or so. There's rapidly intensifying hurricanes here in the Atlantic. Doesn't mean there's more hurricanes, but the ones that do form tend to intensify more rapidly. But back to the original point, there is an energy, I don't know, I wouldn't say catastrophe, but there is going to be a need for more energy. Whether you like data centers or not, there are going to be more computers, right? And they do take energy. We are going to need energy, right? The other thing I often think about here, because we do have so much water in this district, is sea level rise. And it's not just the Atlantic Ocean, right? It's connected to the Chesapeake Bay and our tidal rivers, the Potomac, Rappahannock, the York, the James. They all are in this district. And we've already seen about a 2-foot rise in those waters since the mid 1950s. And the satellites that have been up since the early 1990s, which do very precise measurements of the sea level rise, have shown started to accelerate. So people who have farms that are closer to the water, they're starting to see little pieces of salt kind of bubble up onto the land. Salinity line is coming up, right? There's more coastal flooding, recurring coastal flooding at our coastal towns like Tappahannock. And that's going to really do a number on your infrastructure as you get this repeated salt water coming into your infrastructure. And that's going to cost more money. That's going to raise taxes. So in time, it is going to cost us. So it's like anything else. Do you want to take care of what you have now to avoid a massive cost later, or you just want to roll the dice? And I'm really not into rolling the dice with this.
When you look at how many repetitive losses that communities have, it's mind-boggling to me that it seems like conservatives are okay with the idea of, they're not, because now the Project 2025 is being executed and you can see what they're doing to FEMA. But with that said, communities get bailouts after big natural disasters. And a lot of that recovery happens, in the same footprint, the same way, that was happening pre-event, and it just happens all over again. When I was down covering Hurricane Harvey in Texas in 2017, I met a homeowner who had flooded 3 times in 3 years, and they had to rebuild each time. So for people that are listening to this, walk us through why there is such a return on investment in building in climate adaptation when you're planning for the future, when you're doing infrastructure projects, when you're building new communities, and when you're trying to lower the resilience of communities that are already there.
The first thing I think about does take us back to the insurance industry, right? I mean, we've already seen what has started to happen in Florida with home insurance costs. I mean, they are just skyrocketing. Some places they're not even allowing policies to be written because the risk has gotten so high. One of the things I think we'll see, and I've talked to Andrew Dessler at Texas A&M about this, is people are going to be priced out of places that they've lived all their lives. Again, Florida is already probably the prime example of this, right? So it's going to hit people financially first, long before the seas arrive and stick around. Right? The risk is going to be too much for insurance companies to take on. So they're just going to stop writing policies. And I think that's going to be the one thing that ultimately really shocks people. And it's not going to happen in a couple of weeks, but there may be 1 or 2 storms that are so bad that people just step back. The insurance companies step back and go, we're just not going to write stuff here anymore. We're just done. We're just not going to do it anymore. And then the repercussions for that are going to be phenomenal.
I talking about my Trekkie background, I also like the movie Draft Day. And in the movie, Kevin Costner carrying around a piece of paper, and he's got a note written to him that he doesn't want to forget. And here's what I've got written on mine: the race. So I want to talk about your opponent, and I know you're in a primary. But you've got your opponent is in the GOP, and what is going on in this race where people are talking about climate like you are?
I think right now what we've seen since the inauguration is because of like the things we just saw with the president, so bad, so fast, and incessantly with regard to economics, right? That people have kind of put climate on the back burner. And I can understand that to a point, but it's not going away. You're right. One of the things I want to do, in addition to the science, I want to bring in economists, I want to bring in public policy experts and sit down and go, you know what? What's the best way to get good outcomes for everyone using all the science and data we can get a hold of, right? For me, my frustration is that the incumbent he used to be known as a moderate Republican, but he's just not doing anything. He knows better, right? He sees what's going on. He reads the same things that we do. He has a staff that tells him, but he's just enabling all of this madness economically. And this is a guy who claims to love fishing. I mean, you look at the pictures of this guy's office in DC, there are these fish all over his wall. I mean, he loves to boast about I love fishing. I love going on the water. Great. Are you protecting this water so your grandson can fish it the way you do? Because to me, it doesn't look like you are.
Oh, Sean, I was itching to ask that question about what is he saying about, the rising seas, the fish population, the sustainability, the energy crisis. Is this guy saying anything in this race?
No, he's really not. Now, he likes to brag that he used to be an environmental Republican back in the day, but all the stuff now rings hollow. He's just not stepping up because clearly the leaders of his party don't want to talk about that, right? So he routinely puts out these press releases that don't really say anything about the environment. Another issue I've run into with a lot of folks here in the lower part of the bay is menhaden. It is a very small feeder fish that osprey feed on, that rockfish and striped bass feed on. And there's been a sudden decline in that population. And we're starting to see osprey starve. Osprey chicks starve. And they're a pretty big predator, right? So when they starve, there's something a bit off. So we need to take a closer look at that. That is part of the climate. The biosphere is part of the climate, right? Things grow in certain places because of a climate. When that changes, we see populations of different species move or die out, right? So all these things need to be looked at in concert. Again, good science is interdisciplinary.
So I do want to go in the last few minutes that we have, Sean, and your list. Can you go over your list? As I pull you up full screen for the people that are watching this, not just listening to this, I'll show you the list. But go through this idea of yours.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of us have kind of locked onto this idea that we're basically now in an authoritarian regime, right? Nobody is standing up to the executive branch, right? And the executive branch, the Congress, the courts, all three branches now of the government are run by the GOP. There's no check on them, right? So I literally was walking the dog trying to think of ways to convey how I felt and how we could relate this to people and the voters. So I say it's as simple as A, B, C, D, E. The GOP wants to control your assets. The minimum wage has to come up. 7.25 just isn't going to get it done, man. The GOP wants to control your bedroom. We will protect marriage equality. We've seen the Project 2025 folks. They want to just erase that. And this was one we don't hear a lot about, but I think the GOP wants to control your church. We've seen this bashing of a wall between church and state over the past 10 years or so. And I tell people it's none of the government's business where you spend your Sunday morning, your Friday night, which direction you face when you pray or when you pray at all. That's none of the government's business. So we need to emphasize that. GOP wants to control your doctor. We want to protect the woman's right to choose. All their healthcare should just not be the purview of the federal government. And then finally, back to our climate thing, the GOP wants to control the environment. So we will protect air and water, slow climate change, put teeth back into the EPA for crying out loud. So we don't go back to having the super dirty rivers, the poisonous air like we did in the 1950s and 60s before the EPA even came around, which, oh, by the way, was during the Nixon administration. You'll remember that he was Republican.
It's so funny. They want small government, but I mean, honestly, the biggest group of hypocrites because they literally want to control everything.
They do not want small government. That's what they sell people. Mm-hmm. And then they want to take control. They absolutely want control. They do not want freedom. They want control.
So you're in this race, VA01. You've got an opponent who he's running scared. He's not going to talk about climate change. He's not going to talk about protecting the future. How many fingers do you need in this entire race to indicate who else is talking about climate like you are?
So it is still early, right? We vote for governor here in 2025. So there hasn't been as much attention on this race yet. I mean, I think after the first of the year, the national media will also start to focus in on the congressional races. But I've spoken to all, there's 8 of us that are running for this primary to take on Rob Whitman in the fall of 26. And I've spoken to all of them. And frankly, the truth is I like all of them. I respect all of them. I think they all want to do what's right and hold this administration accountable. But I do also see that there is a commonality here. We're talking about economics. Of course, that's important. We're all talking about civil rights. Of course, that's important. But I'm the only person that is also a scientist in this race. And this is why I think I bring a little bit extra to the race, the scientific integrity, understanding climate, understanding solutions, right? You've got to bring forward solutions, not just solar and wind and batteries, but with all the water in this district, taking care of our shorelines, like living shorelines, oyster reefs, oyster beds. These slow down erosion. There's a whole myriad of solutions we need to put into place so that our kids, our grandkids are able to enjoy the same things that we have now and that we don't go back to the way things were 60 or 70 years ago.
And we need someone in your position that has a science background, because Virginia's first is really in the crosshairs of climate change. As you said, some of the fastest rising sea level rates globally, and incredibly dramatic changes. So to have somebody that has a science background, not just saying this as a friend, but it's vital. And here's your website. So let's just give one last pitch, Sean, if
Yes.
you are able to. Talk a little bit about how people can help you.
Right. So this is the early stages of a campaign. So obviously in this situation, one of the things I've learned in the last 6 or 8 weeks is that campaigns do cost some money. So please go to the website, seanforva.com. That's what greets you when you go to the website. Take a look at what you see. If you like it, we do invite you to make a donation. It's perfectly fine if you don't live in the district to make a donation. You can send it to the Act Blue link, or you could send it by check to the P.O. Box, which is on one of the other pages there. I think it's P.O. Box 4358, Midlothian, Virginia 23112, if I remember correctly. But every little bit helps. One of the things that I have learned is that it takes a lot of money to run a campaign, and we're middle-class folks here. I mean, I have a small business where I do some consulting, and I've lost some clients because a lot of the consulting I did was weather media. And they're like, yeah, we really don't want to do that right now if you're running for Congress. Now, to be fair, my wife has a good job, so we're okay. We're okay, right? But I'm not self-funding my campaign. That's not happening. So yeah, just whatever. If what we've said resonates with you, you want to make a change, we want to move a piece on the big chessboard to get where we need to go, because we're not going to fix it all in one cycle. We need repeated moves here on these chessboards into 3 branches of government to get us where we need to go. So that's really my goal here, is to start us moving in the right direction, because as the expression goes, the longest journey begins with a single step.
Damn. You're a good candidate, Sean.
Thank you, sir. That's what I'm hoping.
I have a message for the people of Virginia 01. That's your race, correct? 01.
Correct.
All right. So I've been referencing the movies. So a little Darth Vader. People of West Virginia 01, vote for Sean.
Thank you, Channing. Thank you,
On behalf of Chris Gloninger and David Thorson, who's gonna regret missing this one, we want to thank you for tuning in and help Sean.
I appreciate it both, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Middle Peninsula, Northern Neck, Lower Peninsula, Metro Richmond, Williamsburg, help us out. We want to help. We want to help you out. So thank you both for your time today.
Right.